Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? You know, the problem with making promises is that sooner or later you have to make good on them. So here I am making good on talking about the momentum system in the game Broken Realms. And the thing is, I'm not even going to talk about all of it because this video is going to be a little long. And I'm only going to talk about the skill system. I'm going to save things like combat and meridians, which is kind of like the cool power, magic, psionic stuff that happens in this game, which is pretty cool, for another video, because those deserve their own little talks on that. So actually, I think I did another little tease about wanting to talk about it sooner or later, because it's been on my list of things to do. And CT McGrew actually called me out, one of my viewers, and said, "Hey, dude, come on. You've been talking about this for a while." So interesting history in getting involved with this game, or picking it up. The first thing that happened was I got interested in Ubiquity, picked up this game, Desolation, by Graymalkin Games, and still on their website they made another game. Probably the first time I ever heard of Broken Realms. You go to brokenrealms.com, you'll find this game. Not a lot of stuff about it on the internet, which is too bad, because it's a cool game. Anyhow, we had the Shelves of Hope and Shelves of Shame series of videos, floating around the RPG Brigade recently, and RuneSlinger had this game, Broken Realms, on a shelf and talked about wanting to play it. I watched a couple other videos he made about it, and I'm now going back because I wanted, when I was preparing to make this video, I said, well, let me go back and see what he said about it, see what other people have said about it. And it's funny because he hardly said anything about it at all. And in fact, it's kind of embarrassing, but going back to that Shelf of Hope video he made, what actually piqued my interest, got me a little interested, was he said he wanted to find a face-to-face, get this game around the table with people that aren't afraid of it. And instantly that piqued my interest. Ooh, I got to check that out. What does that say about me? And then, I went to RPGNet and looked for a review. I think that's what the Google Foo sent me to. And I didn't even get to the review part. I just got to what the premise of the game was, and I was hooked. Like, I have to go check this out. And I ended up buying it, and I'm glad I did. And this is a game about parallel realities. This is a game where there was a Divergent event. I think it's August 13th, 2002, which caused 12 other parallel realities to come into being, besides this real world, or what might be the real world that we live in. And so really interesting. There are people called nearsighters. There's only like 1 or 2% of the population have this hindbrain anomaly. The rest of the people are called negs, negative. But your characters are part of these people that can travel between the worlds and have developed these interesting powers over time. And at first glance, it sounds almost like X-Men. It is not. This is more like Millennium and Frank Black. Characters in this system they're fragile. They are normal people. They are not superhumans. And the skill system reflects that. The skill system is very novel in a lot of ways, not just because it uses D12s. So that's one of the things I first thought. And then I kind of saw more and more of the nuances. It really reflects the idea of you shouldn't need to roll dice very often in this game. They say it more than once. Do it when it's important. But also the way the criteria for success, the difficulty levels that are set, mimic that. And you start to realize the difficulty levels for producing incredible effects psychically, or for doing incredible things as a human being. They're very, very difficult and very, very improbable for the most part. But let's go on with this, and I'll try to make it as short as possible. Because there's a lot to cover, and it's very cool. There's some numbers and some just, stuff. Characters are very, very simple to create. There's a lot that goes into the motivation, personality, and history, the attributes of the character, all that sort of stuff. So a lot of it's kind of psychological, like what is my person like? What's their, what are their, basic, what kind of basic person are they? In terms of like, skill level, abilities, but more like just what's their focus, like were they a mechanic, were they a soldier, were they whatever. So you pick skills that make sense for the person. However, back up a little bit, there's only 3 attributes in this game: mind, body, and soul. And they're very, very intuitive. They are kind of what you would think they would be. Soul is really kind of this mishmash of kind of like willpower and charisma and kind of your spiritual condition, your psychological condition. For lack of a better term, if you go mad, you're probably going to go mad in terms of soul. And there's a whole bunch of things I could talk about here. I really won't. But you decide what's your primary attribute, what's your secondary, and what's your tertiary. And so this indicates how many dice you're going to roll during all kinds of checks, attribute checks. So your primary attribute checks, you're going to be rolling 5 dice. Secondary, you're going to be rolling 4, and on your tertiary attribute, you're going to be rolling 3, and that's it. There's sometimes you're going to gain some dice or lose a die from a roll. But for the most part, that's what you're going to be rolling, is these 3, 4, or 5 dice. There is a 4th attribute called depth. And this only nearsighters have this, only player characters and people like them. I'm not going to cover that in this video. It has to do with all those bizarre powers. So there's other things called distance and momentum, which I really won't talk about. I will talk about momentum because it kind of crosses, it shows up in the skill system as well as in the, for lack of a better term, magic system. Momentum is really representational of kind of like potential energy. It's kind of like the coiled spring. It's being up on that cliff, the rock up on the cliff, and it hasn't been turned into kinetic energy yet. It's just a potential energy that it's inside the character to go above and beyond, or to fuel these incredible powers that they're starting to develop. But you could use it in both cases. So anyhow, how does this skill system work? Because it is, at first glance, it looks, okay, this is pretty standard, uses D12s, but then you start to look at it, it's a little bit different. So, there are 19, I believe, named skills in here, and they cover things like larceny and marksmanship and general combat and computers and the basic stuff you would think of, plus kind of like modern day ones, on general knowledge, academics, all that kind of stuff. I think it said larceny. Larceny is always a good one. Interpersonal relationship skills, all that kind of stuff, and you can have a skill level in each one of these ranks. What the skills levels mean is, what is the target number going to be on this D12 in order to indicate that you've succeeded on that roll of a D12. Now, by default, you're unfamiliar with all these skills, which means you need a 10 or higher. So they call it 10 plus, which means you succeed, or you're going to roll success on this die, rather, 25% of the time. So at character generation, you get to choose 3 skills, which really kind of indicate what kind of person your character is, skill-wise, that are going to be have a target number of 9 plus. They're familiar with these. Not that much greater, but you're familiar with these particular skills. Then you get 13 more points to spread around during character generation. Later on, improving anything is incredibly costly because experience points probably might only come out like 3, 5, or whatever during an adventure. But you need quite a few to actually improve in skills, or you can spend a ton, like probably years worth of play, to improve in an attribute. So not going to happen for the most part. Anyhow, as far as improving attributes. At this point, so you can spend 3 more points to raise another skill from unskilled, needing a 10, to needing a 9. The game, it's a little bit vague in this chapter where it says, the lowest a skill can be, like a broad umbrella skill, is a 9 plus or an 8 plus. So I'm assuming that means that you get your 3 freebie skills, and you could spend 3 points to make one of those skills have a target number of 8. It's a little vague, but I think that's what they mean. And if it's not, oh well. It's basically around there, or that's the basic idea. Or you can choose to make have 4 or 5 broad areas that you're that skilled at. However, you can also spend these points on a one-to-one basis to improve concentrations. So say you have the marksmanship skill. And say, whether you have it or not, even if you decide that you're in general you're unskilled at that, you can add some points to concentrations in that skill. But let's just say you have it you've decided that's one of your freebie skills. You're a cop. All right. Well, you can say, all right, but I have concentrations. You can put 2 more points in that skill, that sub skill, that concentration. So now the target numbers for your using a pistol is going to be 7 plus. And say and that's a body roll. So maybe you get to roll 5 dice. And every die that rolls 7 or greater, that's a success for you. So that's pretty much how the skill system works. Now, they also talk about what are the target numbers when you actually show up and need to roll dice. And here's where it gets a little bit different than a lot of games. It took me really a couple passes through this book to really kind of have this sink in, just how average and fragile the characters are. This isn't a bad thing. It's just kind of the flavor of this game, because for the most part it says don't have people roll dice unless it's really meaningful. Is failure going to be interesting? Is this something that's really going to be important to the story or the situation? And in that case, go ahead and roll dice. And so there's 6 different target numbers, or difficulty numbers they have in this game. The first one is easy, 0 successes. You can just kind of do that. Everybody can do this, There's average. That's just, you just need 1 success in order to be able to do this. A lot of just everyday common sort of tasks. So even if you have this 5-die pool, you're just looking for 1 success. There are things that they call challenging, which need 2 successes. This is going to be, for the most part, it took a while for me to read this to realize this is going to be most of the hard stuff that people do. is going to fall into that needing 2 successes. This is where things get a little bit tough. This is like, setting a broken bone, seducing a stranger, hacking into a computer. Things that are just, you look at somebody else do that and you're like, wow, that was pretty amazing. The daunting things need 3 successes. Then they make, it really clear in this the text that this is something that you see people do in the movies. This is like incredible. This is like all those things that Bruce Willis did in Die Hard. Those are like 3s. Something that's formidable needs 4 successes. This is like Hail Mary, like, you've got to be, you should take pictures. This should be in the news that somebody was able to do this. And ridiculous is 5 successes. That is like once in a lifetime. Maybe somebody in your town one time during your life actually did this. So for the most part, you're not looking for that many successes. And it's up to the game master at that point to figure out whether they want to do that or not, or how tough they want this to be. And so the book makes it clear too. It took a couple passages for me to kind of get this, that like average characters, they're going to be, or on average rather, I'm sorry, characters are going to be making skill rolls relevant to what they already said they're going to be good at. On 4 dice with a target number of 9+, they're going to be doing something in their global skills. Or maybe 4 dice at 7+ target number if there's something they're really, really good at. So say that you're that cop shooting the gun, or you're that hacker you're really good at hacking into whatever, I don't know, apples for lack of a better thing. So that's approximately what are your chances of actually generating successes at that point? Well, at a 9+ target number with 4 dice, it's 40% of the time you're going to get 1 success, and not even 50-50. Let's see. 11% of the time, 3 successes, and only 1% of the time you're going to get 4 successes. So these are hard tasks you're going to run into. If it gets a 7+, you're like really good at this out of the starting gate. Okay, 2 successes, that's 68% of the time, so over half. Only 31% of the time you're going to get 3 successes, and only 6% of the time you're going to get 4 successes. Do that Hail Mary thing. So, setting difficulties numbers in this game, you have to be really careful. But this represents some situations that are incredibly difficult. So now what the hell is momentum? I'm not even at 13 minutes. I wanted to wait till 13 minutes. I really didn't. But momentum happens anytime you roll a 13. So in these pools of dice, as you're rolling them, anytime 2 of these dice add up to a 13, you have generated a point of momentum. Now keep in mind, this is a good thing and a bad thing, because that means unless your target number was something like 6 or less, so you need a 6+, and at that point, by that point, you're earning experience and spending money on a concentration to get it lower and lower and lower. You can never increase a skill ever again after character generation. Just concentrations. It takes an awful lot of experience to get something down to needing a 6 or a 5 or a 4 as a target number. An awful lot. You are really, really good at that point. So at that point, unless you've got that target number of 6 or lower, well, that means that you failed one of those rolls already. So momentum is kind of a good thing and a bad thing. But you're generating more of this momentum for your character. So what is that going to do for you? Well, I'm glad you asked. At that point, let's see. First thing you can do is you can cash it in right then as you generate it for 2 more dice. So you have more chances for more successes. Pretty much get a reroll when it comes right down to it. It's almost like D&D, the 5th edition advantage, disadvantage. You roll these 2 dice. Even if both of them come up as a success, you only get to keep one of them. But you have a chance for generating 1 more success. Or you can bank it. If you bank a point of momentum, well, what is that going to do for you later? You could use it as an automatic success. So you've got a die roll, you're short of success. Okay, I use one of my points of momentum to have a success. You could, before a roll happens, use it for an extra die in your roll. And so part of what you're doing is you're trying to fuel more momentum at that point. Or what you can use it for is you can use every point of momentum to fuel a success when you're making a meridian check and you're trying to do something with some of your cool psychic magic powers, which once again is a different video. But those don't come for free. It takes an awful lot of energy on the part of the character to have these things happen. And when they do happen, they're pretty freaking dramatic and cool. So with the chances of rolling these 13s, not particularly high. Depends on actually the dice pool. If you're rolling, let's see, if you're rolling 2 dice, you got an 8.33% chance of rolling a 13, not very high. 3 dice, you got a 23.5% chance, roughly. If you've got 4 dice, you got about a 42% chance of rolling at least 1, so getting pretty high. Only 3% chance, 3.5% chance of rolling 2 13s. And because once you roll 13, you kind of take those 2 dice out of the little pool as far as getting momentum. 5 dice, you got a 71% chance of rolling at least 1 13. and a 16.88%, almost 17% chance of rolling 2. So generally, you're going to be generating momentum. How are you going to generate momentum? Use your primary attribute. And that's how that's going to work. Let's see if there's anything else that's really relevant to the skill system. You can botch a skill roll if you roll all 1s and 2s on your dice. You can fail if you're rolling at least 1, 3, or better, but you just haven't rolled any successes. You get a partial success if you've generated some successes, but not enough to really succeed in that area. And then it's an exceptional success if you roll 3 or more successes over what you need, which is almost never going to happen. But if you roll like 1 or 2 more than you need, it tells you to go ahead and narrate a little extra success in terms of what the character was trying to do. But for the most part, at the end of the day, first thing is you're not going to need to roll for a lot of things. Second is, unless it's some crazy Hail Mary situation, which you may run into, for the most part, you're going to be looking for 2 or 3 successes to take care of most activities. When you're looking for 3, 4, 5, these things probably are not going to happen at that point. And once again, too, it's just because you're really good at something, doesn't mean that you're always going to succeed, because you may be using a different attribute. You could have a particular ability in, say, sports, and say physically you're rolling 5 dice, that's your primary attribute. So maybe you are able to do a lot of things involving with sports when you're using your body skill. But say when you're using your mind, you decide that you're going to be a tertiary, that's really unfair stereotype to do. Well, at that point, if you're trying to remember sports trivia, well, then you're only rolling 3 dice at that particular point. It is a really cool system. I enjoy it because it really kind of, just gives you a look at just how average, I keep saying that, but average and fragile the characters are. There are some modifiers that give you more dice or less dice, and that's more like synergy. If you've got 2 skills that are kind of related, there's times if you have teamwork, you have extra people helping you that are reasonably skilled in that area as well. They can add another die to your roll. Time, if you don't have enough time, they can remove dice from your pool. And if you have a lot of time, they can add a die to your pool. If your gear is better or not so good. Any other kind of qualifiers can usually give you plus or negative 1 or 2 dice. Not going to change your target numbers for successes, but it's just how many dice you need. So it's a cool system. I really enjoy it. I'm not sure if I'd use it outside of this game, but it is still one of those really intriguing systems. It is very different than something like Ubiquity. It is not cinematic at all. But when you do have to use it, the good thing is you can generate some momentum, and momentum is good because you need momentum. But that is another story.